Now, time for the performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performance was just lacked that intensity.
Right.
Let's get straight into this. The bad, the good and the grand. The bad this week, we're going to chat a little bit about the Lions in Barcelona, and in the grand we're going to chat about Ireland in general at the Olympic Games, and then in the good, naturally, Kelly Harrington's going to come up and the Cork hurlers. So if we start in red and actually start with the Lions, it's interesting, even looking through some of the back pages this morning, the feeling of negativity after this tour is sort of existential, that there is this sort of sense that the Lions tour let the game of rugby down, that as a spectacle it was so poor, and as a nation of sports people, South Africa were so mean, and their time wasting and their antics throughout the tour have brought shame on the game of rugby union, which kind of spells to me a little bit of sour grapes, to be quite honest with you. Like, I get the feeling of distaste when your team loses, and like I guess we were all relatively rooting for the Lions. But if we step back from this for a moment, do we not just think that the Lions got outsmarted and outmuscled, and in the dark alley that is a Lions tour, South Africa were just better?
Is that what you think?
Kind of, to be honest. Like,
that at the end of a sporting contest, the best team wins, and that we should shake hands and get on with it and forget about it? Is that really what you think?
I think in the context of this, kind of think South Africa were the better team. There was a lot of sideshows going on, obviously, in the build-up to the second test in particular, but let's not allow that to colour our view to the point where we think where the Lions were actually better.
Is it just a sideshow where straight red card offences become yellows or not even penalties because the referees have been terrorised and terrified by what's going to happen and the scrutiny they've been put under? I think that what happened was a fundamental shift in how teams must manage refereeing from now on. When Rassie Erasmus comes out and says, do you remember that video you made where you found the scene where they were giving out to, was it the centre or the back row, for not doing a full, was he trying to mimic Owen Farrell's tackle technique, where it was essentially like he was a human torpedo, and they were like, oh yeah, that's what you have to do. What you have to do now is what the rules are as we've been shown them, not what the rules are as what they're written down. And so what Rassie has now done is exactly the same thing. He has changed the game where every head coach should come out and in minute detail analyse every single fault that the opposition has had and criticise and blame the referee, but say, oh, I'm not actually blaming you here. I'm not blaming you, I'm just going on what you did last week. Rassie's opened a can of worms here, and it has completely changed the game. And I think if you don't do this now, as an international manager, then you're not doing your job properly, because he changed the rules and World Rugby allowed him to change the rules. And this is not sour grapes in any way whatsoever. I'm on the record here saying I think that South African rugby culture is a fairly bankrupt thing where you have teenagers doping to try and get contracts. It's in my view one of the worst sporting cultures on the planet. And I think that what we saw over the course of the tests was the manifestation of that from South Africa. So if you're saying at the end of this we should shake hands and go, that's grand, the best team won, the best team definitely won. I make no bones about that. They in that first game that the Lions won, the refereeing decisions were bad, and the South Africans should have won that game and would have won that game if the referee had done what he was supposed to do. In the second test, if the referee had done what he was supposed to do, the Lions would have won that game. Colby would have got a red card and wouldn't have been on the field to win the game in the third one. And the third test could have been a very different one. It would have been very interesting to see what happens. And I don't really care about the outcome, who wins, who loses, whatever. But ultimately, in the long term, if we don't see Andy Farrell giving it to the referees in advance of games and releasing these type of videos, then is he doing his job? I don't know. I mean, they're the rules of engagement, and that's what Rassie wants, because that's what Rassie said. Oh, you know, the other thing is that like they're supposed to be this big macho, we are the men culture, when actually all they are whining babies. That was the most babyish. The rules didn't. And the other one was like there was a Bismarck Duplessis tackle on Dan Carter from 10 years ago. They're still bitching about. That's worse than us and Thierry Henry. if there is a conspiracy against South Africa and South African rugby from the referees, it is literally the worst conspiracy in the history of humanity, because they've won 3 World Cups. It's a shitty conspiracy that has completely failed to deliver on what it's supposed to do, which is preventing South African rugby from revealing its true self. And yet I think South African rugby managed to reveal its true self. So I don't think that we should just forgive and forget, because this changed the game. That's it. It's over. You've got to go after the referees. You've got to attack the referees, because that's what the best team in the world who've just won the World Cup, that's what they do, and they set the rules.
The counterpoint to that is that the conditions were there for Rassie Erasmus to do something like this, for any coach to do something like this. It's no coincidence that Sky Sports went into this Lions tour with Nigel Owens as co-commentator. Nigel Owens didn't come on as co-commentator as a result of Rassie Erasmus making those comments. Before this tour, the conditions existed in rugby union for the referee to be as important as any player on the pitch. That is the way we view this game. Every single TMO decision was already being scrutinised. There was already a lot of sour grapes after every Six Nations game, after every big Champions Cup game that we would watch. The refereeing is part of the conversation now in a much bigger way than it's ever been in the past in rugby union. And that is what leads to an extraordinary moment, which was the build-up to the second test. So I don't think Rassie Erasmus has caused this on his own. I think it's definitely been the most brazen attempt at trying to win over a referee and influence a referee. But I don't think it exists in isolation. I think that there were years and years and years of an attitude towards referee which was full of disdain in rugby, which has led us to this moment. Like, I mean, there was a urinal in New Zealand with Wayne Barnes' head etched into it after the 2007 World Cup. Like, this is the sort of level of notoriety that referees have had in the recent history of rugby, and this was just a further step forward. So, like, it's been incompetence up to this point. What South Africa were alleging was that this was somehow the rest of the world against them. Where you know, what gave them that idea? You know, where did they suddenly get the notion that the rest of the world was against them? Maybe because the rest of the world was against them for a long period of time for, you know, historically important reasons. I think that's not actually a counterpoint. I think that explains stuff, and I think fair enough. I think that we're probably making the same point here, that like the game has reached a point now where it's really screwed. You would be very worried about the future of rugby. I do not expect Andy Farrell, for clarity's sake, I do not expect Andy Farrell to go and do an hour-long pre-match video every time pointing out how Kyle Sinclair is scrummaging wrong and how the number 8 isn't actually bound properly at the scrum. That would be boring and crap. And the game was crap. The second game was one of the worst games of rugby of all time to watch. Like, it lacked all form of entertainment because of what Rassie did. And I'm being completely facetious when I say that you should do that, because you shouldn't do this. And World Rugby needs to throw the book at him, but they won't. They won't throw the book at him. But your job as a head coach, as a director of rugby, is to create a siege mentality at times. And South Africa have absolutely lived off that. What you mentioned there about the school kids doping, they have used that as part of that mentality, as part of all the world thinks we're cheats. Rotten. But they use that as motivation, and they've used it very well. And that is your job as a head coach and as a director of rugby. Like, I'm still Rassie did a great job. Rassie, I think, I make them absolute favourites to win the World Cup. And I said this on Twitter the other night. When they win the World Cup, all those mediocre books that they use to cash in the aftermath of winning that World Cup are all going to point to Rassie's video and go, yeah, he said what we were all thinking. Yeah. And it rallies the team and it brings them all together. But I just think from a rugby's perspective that it is absolutely rotten and it's very damaging. Okay, you may be right. You may be right in that. I do think, though, that this has been amplified by people within the Lions setup. Even Gregor Townsend being like, I don't think this is a good look for the game. And I know he was talking about time wasting and all that. And he's a great rugby man who I assume wants to uphold the traditions that rugby union talks about all the time. And maybe he feels that they were slipping, and I'm sure what he's speaking about is a genuine idea, and he genuinely feels that it's not a good look for the game. But I just find it interesting that this is the tone coming from the Lions side of things, the predominant tone coming from the Lions side of things in the aftermath of a series defeat, when the Lions were really bad for a lot of the series, and a lot of the questions should be asked about why the Lions were so bad. Yeah, Finn Russell was pretty good. Finn Russell changed the game immediately. It was like, you could look like this? Robbie Hedger can get the ball in a bit of space. Wow. Okay. Look, we'll move on because we're going to do Matt Williams in this a little bit later on. But you're right. The Lions should absolutely be in the red. But South African rugby culture,
Not interested.
MORNE STEYN strikes again, it says on screen. Oh my God. Like, you were talking about predictions. Neil Tracy the other day did say that he was going to come on and score in the 79th minute, and I think he actually got it bang on. We're going to move on to Barcelona, who are in the red, because you made Lionel Messi cry, Barcelona, and that is a good enough reason for you to be in the red as far as I'm concerned. Now, I will say that, like, I mean, this is obviously a very public breakup, and Lionel Messi has got his act together and moves on pretty quickly. If reports are to be believed, is it L'Equipe saying it? I see Goal reporting it as well, that a medical with Paris Saint-Germain is due today. So Lionel Messi has packed his bags and is getting going on his Parisian adventure pretty quickly. Now, in fairness, there is a season just around the corner, so you can't really blame him on that front. But there are a couple of different interesting wrinkles to this thing. Just looking at Paris Saint-Germain play last night, they got their Ligue 1 campaign up and running with a win. Their second goal scorer on the night was Mauro Icardi, who is, of course, Lionel Messi's fellow countryman. And this is one thing that I'm going to be quite interested in. How does the Lionel Messi-Mauro Icardi relationship work when he arrives at Paris? Because Icardi is, of course, married to Maxi Lopez's ex-wife, which was this relatively dramatic thing for Argentinian football over the past 5 or 6 years, where Maxi Lopez, who was really good friends with Lionel Messi, felt betrayed by his former teammate who went off and ran away with a young one, aka his wife. Messi allegedly issued an ultimatum to the Argentine Football Union, saying that he wouldn't play for Argentina if Icardi was to play for Argentina. Now, Messi has disputed that, but the fact of the matter is that Icardi hasn't played for Argentina in years. He hasn't got a call-up in a long, long time. So does this simmering beef between them become a little bit of a problem at PSG? I would say that if you're Nasser El-Khelaifi, I think that there's one head that rolls in that particular situation if Messi is there and he won't play with Mauro Icardi. It is going to be...
That's tough, isn't it? It's like, you know, he marries for love, he follows his heart, and all of a sudden it's like, gone from the Argentina team, gone from PSG. Like, what? I mean, come on, Messi, get over yourself.
Yeah, maybe it'll be fine. Maybe there's been enough water under the bridge at this point. The other thing now is that, like, Mauricio Pochettino, the pressure is on now, boy. Like, this has been a real career upgrade for him, as good as he was at times with Tottenham Hotspur. To be a manager of Neymar, Mbappe and Lionel Messi is a phenomenal situation to be in, but it's also the most high-pressure job in world football now, because yes, you need to win your domestic league, no questions asked, which, let's not forget, they're not actually champions of at the moment, but they absolutely need to win the Champions League now. There can be no questions asked about that. Like, maybe with just Neymar and Mbappe, you could say, well, Manchester City have also a really good squad, and Messi is playing at Barcelona, and they're always going to be a contender. But this changes everything. This makes you have to win the Champions League and knockout competition, or else it has been a failure of a season. It's going to be fascinating to see the three of them play together. Like, I assume Mbappe is going to stay now that everybody in La Liga is completely screwed by these rules. You would kind of have to fear for someone like Wijnaldum or Ander Herrera and the amount of running they will have to do throughout the season. Can a team with those three stars up front, all three of which aren't necessarily known for their work rate and their tracking back, can a team like that actually win a Champions League?
Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see. PSG 3-1, 7-2. Manchester City 3-1, 7-2. Bayern Munich 8-1. Liverpool 9. Chelsea 10. Manchester United 12-16, and Juve 20. They're the odds. So if you think that they're nailed on to win, anyway, I don't know.
What is also a really kind of an interesting off the pitch angle in all of this is UEFA's. Is it UEFA or the European football's financial fair play rules? Because obviously Spain's FFP has come under the microscope quite a bit over the last week or so, and I think we've all been a little bit shocked and reminded by how stringent their rules are, where those rules simply just do not exist on a European level. And in fact, European football relaxed the rules last year to allow for more spending during the pandemic, more losses during the pandemic, which has obviously played right into PSG's hands, right into Manchester City's hands. But one of the outcomes of the Super League debacle was that Agnelli is gone as the head of the ECA, and his replacement is Nasser El-Khelaifi, head of Paris Saint-Germain. The ECA are going to be drafting up new financial fair play rules later on this year. So Nasser El-Khelaifi will be coming up with the rules around financial fair play on a European level, which will directly impact his club. There is a sense out there that they're not going to get stung for another 3 years. And I've seen it reported that because of the sanctions being put on the long finger for 3 years, that PSG are going to do everything in their power. They're going to lose as much as they want to over the next 3 seasons to actually win this thing. So if you think Messi is the final piece of the jigsaw, then think again, there might be bigger spending coming from Paris.
Well, especially because they don't have to spend the transfer fee that they thought they were going to have to spend on Leo Messi back when... anyway, it's all a bit of a mess. Right, let's move on quickly.
Yeah, just very quickly, let's just mention Team Ireland in the orange. I think that's a little bit harsh. I think 2 gold medals is an automatic green. But if you take away the 2 gold medals, the rest of the performance has been up and down, and in a really entertaining way. Like, I know that the athletes who had so much heartbreak won't see it like that, but I certainly don't remember an Olympic Games where we've experienced so much frequent annoyance and heartbreak and frustration watching so many different sports. And it went from the the second day of the games, from the taekwondo and Jack Woolley's extraordinary defeat in the first rounds to Therese McClenaghan in the middle weekend, which was just devastating, to Natalia Coyle last Friday. Like, and you can throw in the hockey team and the men's sevens team in the rugby as other moments of real disappointment in these games, which kind of happened in weird ways.
And also, wouldn't it have been great to see Rashida Adeleke at the games, to see what she could have done as part of any of the thing? And wouldn't it be great now, thinking she's got that experience, whatever it was, good, bad or indifferent, for Paris in 3 years' time?
Yeah, that would, and like, I mean, Sonia O'Sullivan was making that point on TV that would have been a great chance for her if Athletics Ireland were a little bit more brave with their decision making. Even if she'd gone as a reserve and actually subbed in for the final of that 4x400 mixed relay, that could have actually been...
Might have, in the end, helped Phil Healy too. Who knows?
Well, exactly. So there are tons of those different moments that come from a really positive games, but I think that is just the nature of the beast. When you send 116 athletes to a games, somebody's going to get hurt along the way, and it just turned out that, and like, I forgot to mention Rory McIlroy as well, it just turned out that the way Ireland lost was quite heartbreaking in a lot of ways. And
was Rory McIlroy like, I'm not interested in this, I don't know what this is going to be, this is going to be rubbish, this isn't very good, oh my god, I can't believe how good that was? Is that the arc, which is exactly the same as the Ryder Cup arc he went on?
Rory McIlroy was like the nana we heard from Portland Row after his final round. He was making like Virgin Mary signs with the tricolour around his back after missing that last putt. He was like, I'm in on Team Ireland at this point. He has had this arrival, and I mean, he said he never tried as hard ever to win something. But
finished third in his life. Yeah.
And I should mention then, just at the end, just to go back to Natalia Coyle, because we're kind of reviewing the weekend here this morning. That was our last real moment of heartbreak, I think it's fair to say, over the course of the Olympics. And I think it just has to go down as one of the most extraordinary bad news stories in Irish sport ever, because the country came together on Friday afternoon in large disdain for a horse, and Constantine etched in the annals of terrible people who've done terrible things to Irish sports fans over the years. Obviously it wasn't funny, but it has a comical side effect. We sat and watched Natalia Coyle, and it was kind of like this jaw-dropping moment where we all became aware or reminded of the rules of modern pentathlon, where you have to be a horse whisperer to actually succeed in this thing. And then we saw the German favourite suffer. And I'm not sure, did you see the story that came out after this?
Yeah.
The German's coach punched the horse.
Yeah.
And is now up for, obviously, for animal welfare. It has been criticised massively on that front.
German modern pentathlete and Newcastle fans, or was it a Sunderland fan?
It was Newcastle, wasn't
Newcastle,
it? Yeah.
Together at last.
No, I would never have thought that we would be united as a nation trying to spout our disdain for Constantina Horse, and I even less expected to hear about a German coach punching a horse. The modern pentathlon is mad, and we just happen to have someone who's very, very good at modern pentathlon, so we were sucked into the madness of it, and unfortunately said madness involved great disappointment. Yeah,
I mean, the last 24 hours of the Olympics was pretty amazing. The Olympic handball was on, the water polo was on, all the stuff that, like, I really think the Olympics should be over a month instead of the concertina version that we have right now, because I didn't get the opportunity to spend enough time getting into the climbing, which looked absolutely mental.
Yeah.
Or the BMXing, which I would happily spend a Friday evening going, or Wednesday evening. I'm going to sit and watch a couple of hours of this because I never get to see this, and it looks brilliant. So if we could fix it that the Olympics in Paris is over 3 weeks even, wouldn't that be better for all of us?
Make a massive difference, because there is the sense that the swimming and the athletics is so important, and it is. They are the two main sports of the Olympic Games. But when they're on, you're kind of stuck on them a little bit. Like you're watching the 1500 metre final. You're not watching the speed climbing. I do think the time difference probably didn't help. That we were kind of living off highlights a little bit, flicking, fast forwarding.
It was rubbish. There's no point. The time difference is rubbish for us. I mean, I see now how bad it is when it's in this part of the world for the rest of the world, and I understand that it's a completely old Europe centric view of the world. But like, look, them's the breaks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We will move on to the greens in the performance rankings. There's a couple of important bits here. Obviously, Kelly Harrington is up there as number 1, but Cork also in green. This was a roller coaster yesterday, because as that second half was progressing, you started to root for Cork. Certainly I hadn't rooted for Cork in a way like I was rooting for Cork yesterday in the second half, because it just felt like, and I kind of like tweeted this, it's kind of like they had that Arya Stark mentality of not today, that there was going to be, there were so many warnings in the past that Kilkenny could do to Cork, what they've always done to them in living memory, like do to them like what they did in 2019, which was like a really good second half where Cork just kind of laid down and were kind of lily-livered in their approach. And the way they performed in the second half and the subs they brought off the bench and the impact that they had, it seems to me that we were seeing a new Cork yesterday. And all of a sudden, Kilkenny scored that last second goal, and it's like, hold on a minute here. Like, what does this do? How far does this actually set Cork back if they end up losing this in extra time? So to actually come back after that moment and show what Corkness should be all about and actually get over the line, I think is a huge moment for the trajectory of Cork hurling once again, and on this rebound from a dark few years where, to me, they reminded me of the Dublin football team in the 2000s, where no matter what they would try and do, they would always fail to make an All-Ireland final. Everything since 2013 has reminded me of the chaos years of Dublin. And when they conceded that goal yesterday, that analogy was set in concrete. It was like, right, that's it. They are the Dublin of the 2000s, and you can write them off. And then they hammered them in extra time. They didn't just win in extra time, they hammered them in extra time. And it's like, are they just so beautifully unaware of the pressure that they were under? Are they so brilliantly cocky in themselves that they just weren't aware of what they just done, what they just bottled, that they went out to perform like they did? And that bodes really well, maybe not for the final, but for the future of this Cork team, because they are a young team and we're starting to become aware of them. And I don't know, I think that's the sort of mentality that will lead to Limerick being beaten eventually. I don't think it'll happen in this year's All-Ireland final, but I've changed my view completely after yesterday's game and even before extra time, where I thought Kilkenny were the team to beat Limerick this year. But now I think we're actually getting the All-Ireland final we deserve and that hurling deserves.
Yeah, it's going to be pace versus pace and power. Very interesting to see exactly how close Cork can get to Limerick and how much they can rattle them. We'll obviously preview that in more detail. So if you want more of a hurling fix, check out the James Scale piece that we're going to do a little bit later on in the show. And if you want more Kelly Harrington fix, then get over to the highlight stream on the OTB podcast network. You can subscribe to that on the OTB Sports app. So Kelly Harrington's obviously number 1, Cork hurling number 2. We'll talk Limerick, as I said, with James Scale a little bit later on. Ireland's Olympics in the middle, Barcelona and the Lions in red. We're going to talk rugby in just a moment, Maddie Williams, but that is this week's Power Rankings.